He again is probably the most athletic player on this team. And
why you would use that, especially when one call.
Just a horrible, horrible situation for them.
I don't think that's going to happen.
Hello and welcome back to TakeaSide, presented by Sided Debates. We've got a great show for you today. Before we get started with our show, be sure to get on to sided.co or the Sided Debates app to post topics, vote, comment, and engage with other users on the site to climb up that leaderboard for a chance at winning a $25 Amazon gift card. The more interaction your debate can get, the more points you earn, inching you closer to that top prize. Now for our first debate today, I am joined by Kyle Mathis and Matt Minier to debate the biggest NBA All-Star snub. 2 weeks ago, the NBA released the All-Star team starters, and it was met with some scrutiny on some of the players left off the list. The biggest surprise of the lineup is that Andrew Wiggins was voted as a starter for the first time in his career. Matt, does Wiggins deserve a spot as a starter, and who is the best player that didn't make the starting lineup?
Well, I think there's always some debate every year of whether who should have made the All-Star team, who shouldn't have. So I'm going to start off with you. Who do you think are some guys that got snubbed from this year's All-Star game?
Yeah, I'll say two guys, and the first guy, well, they're both brothers, and the first guy I think that got snubbed is LaMelo Ball. And yes, he made the Rising Stars game, but I do think that he's good enough to be in the All-Star game as a reserve. He's averaging 20.6 points per game in his last 10 games, so he's led the Hornets to an over 500 record right now. Currently, the Hornets are sitting at a 9 seed in the East, so right now they are in the play-in right now as it stands, but obviously he's looking to increase that record as the season goes on, hopefully lead them into an actual playoff seeding, like 7 or above. But I don't know, I think LaMelo Ball, he has a lot of highlights. We saw that last season, saw that this season. I think he's been absolutely just running rampant through the NBA, producing highlights like I said, and I think that he does deserve to be in the All-Star game. I think in the next few years he's going to be in the All-Star game. Like, they can put him in the Rising Stars game this year, but I think in the next few years let's expect to see him in the All-Star game. And the second guy I have is going to be a shocker to many, and I got a lot of hate and a lot of criticism for it in the pre-show, but Lonzo Ball. And I am a Chicago Bulls fan, and I'm not just saying it because I'm a Chicago Bulls fan, but I think he's absolutely built himself a new reputation as a player ever since leaving the Lakers, leaving the Pelicans. He joined the Bulls. He is a great shot creator. He's just a great player all around, and he might be averaging only 13 points a game and 5 assists per game, but I think that he's a great team player. He might not be an all-around scorer. He's a great team player, and he's really improved his shot. And I think in the next few years, like I said with LaMelo, we could see the two Ball brothers that are in the NBA right now being an all-star game together. So
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on your point about LaMelo. He's been running rampant through the NBA this year. He's going to be a superstar to come. But Lonzo Ball, I just don't see it right now. And I'm a Bulls fan too. I love Lonzo, but right now I don't think he's played enough games. He's been out since January 14th with a knee injury. And he's the fourth option on the Bulls. I think if anybody from the Bulls that got snubbed, I think it'd be Vucevic, and he hasn't had the great of a year. But Lonzo, yes, he has really good numbers, but I think he just needs to improve his scoring, I think, before he can become an All-Star. And now he averages 13 points a game. That I just won't get you votes in this climate right now. But I think two guys that I think that also got snubbed were Jaylen Brown, averaging 24, 3, and 5 this year, and shooting 45% from the field and 35% from the three. And if you look at guys who got a reserve spot, like Chris Middleton, I think he definitely deserves it over him. And I think, yes, the Bucks are one of the best teams in the East, but I don't think that record should play a factor like it does usually. You say, for example, the Warriors, they got two guys, Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins, who debatably shouldn't be in the All-Star game. Maybe they should be reserves, but like Andrew Wiggins, maybe shouldn't be a starter. And I think that's one problem with the voting right now. I think fans have too much of a say. I think it should go more to the players and coaches and the media, because there's guys that are getting left out. And another example, you got DeJounte Murray on the Spurs, who, yes, the Spurs aren't having that great of a year this year, but he's he's playing one of his best years so far in his young career. Right now, he's leading the league in steals per game at 2 steals per game, and averaging 29 and 8, almost just a triple double, and that's really good in this league nowadays. One of the top two-way guards in the league. So I think that he really can make an argument for DeJounte Murray, even though the Spurs aren't that good, and clearly the best player on the Spurs. So I think that if fan voting didn't have so much of an impact right now on the All-Star game, I think he would be a sure lock.
Oh yeah, I think fan voting is a big, I wouldn't say issue, but I think the fans might have a little too much say in it. I mean, just looking at some of the starters compared to some of the reserves, I do think that Karl Anthony Towns should be a starter over Andrew Wiggins. And yes, Andrew Wiggins is a KU alum, but like I just can't sit back and really just look at this and not be confused on why Cat wasn't a starter over Wiggins. And also, I think Draymond Green's another big, I think like a lucky pick for the West for sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the Warriors being so popular, have such a huge fan base, and them having a really good year this year. I think it's all those fans coming in to vote for guys like Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green. But what impact do you think the fans should have? Do you think they should have a lot less? Like, do you think that the media and players maybe should have like maybe 75% of the vote, and then maybe the players 25, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, there's been instances where there's been fan favorites that haven't been the best players in the league, and I think if the fans have a big say in it, I think that could kind of ruin some other players' potentials of making the All-Star games, or All-Star game. And I think, I mean, just an example, a few years ago, Joe Ingles, like, yeah, he's really good, but there used to be a Joe Ingles Instagram account that would get like thousands and thousands of likes per post, and people could vote him into the game even though he might not have deserved it a couple years ago, and other people might have been able to.
Yeah, I totally agree. Overall, I think that maybe fans should have a little bit of less say in All-Star voting this year and give it to guys who actually deserve it. But it'll be interesting to see this year's All-Star game. The past few years have been really exciting to watch ever since they changed the format. So hopefully we get a good game this year. And with that, we'll send it back to break.
Diversity. What is diversity? It can be an umbrella term for a variety of things, ranging from diversity among different people, places, cultures, and ideas, to the way people express themselves and the way they interact with the world. In today's world, people interact with one another and share their thoughts through social media. Let's take Twitter, for example. How are people of different backgrounds, ethnicities, and sexual orientations with different political beliefs, interests, and job titles using this platform differently? Currently, celebrities are interacting with their fans on Twitter by speaking their minds, sharing their beliefs, and supporting social issues. Professional sports figures and organizations in the United States are using Twitter to support social causes and bring attention to current social matters, such as encouraging their fans to vote. Users are voicing their opinions about current issues surrounding racial inequalities, social injustice, and police brutality in the United States. There's diversity in the way people are discussing the upcoming presidential election, especially regarding their opinions of each candidate. Different news outlets are not only highlighting stories in the US, but are talking about important stories from around the world. But many Twitter users don't post about controversial matters or social issues at all. Rather, they use their platform to create memes and post funny content for entertainment. While many topics going around this app involve social issues and political opinions, Twitter creates a space where people can pull together collections of diverse thoughts, comments, opinions, goals, and even a little humor too. So how can we use this platform to express our differences? More importantly, how can we use it to learn from each other's differences today?
For our next debate, we'll be switching into some MLB news. Recently, the Hall of Fame committee voted to not elect either Roger Clemens or Barry Bonds into baseball's most prestigious honor. This seemed to have had mostly negative reaction by fans as they felt that both players had more than deserving Hall of Fame careers. I am joined by both Chad Cushing and Jordan Ziegler to debate, but Chad, let's start with you. Do you feel these players should have been elected?
I think there is absolutely zero doubt in my mind that Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, any of the steroid users are Hall of Famers. We are talking about some of the best players ever who played during a period of baseball where we were begging for the fans to be re-engaged. We needed the spark of the game to reunite, and these are the guys that did it for the game, And the fact that later on we're not able to reward them by putting them in the Hall of Fame, I think that it is terrible.
I mean, I can see your point right out of the gate, but there's an amazing article by Doug Glanville, a former MLB player, and he talks about how guys like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, yes, they would have been starters, steroids or no steroids, but they influenced a lot of other people that might not have been starters if it wasn't for the help of performance-enhancing drugs. And so people that played the game supposedly clean were often finding themselves on the bench or even out of jobs because people taking PEDs were getting promoted over them. So I think the precedent that guys like Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens set for the league had an overall negative impact.
I can see that. I understand. I think that if we're talking about a group of different players throughout that era who all use steroids, I mean, it's called the steroid era of baseball. Cannot have a conversation without talking about Bud Selig. I mean, this is a guy that, as a commissioner, was profiting, benefiting, reaping all the benefits of these players using steroids. Knows what's going on. He absolutely knew what was going on throughout this whole entire time. There was no initiatives took to try and test the players more often, to try and get to the bottom of this. You don't have guys hitting 73 home runs, having home run races for the record without some sort of suspicion. I mean, we see Barry Bonds pre-1998, and then Barry Bonds' head went like 3 times as big. So Bud Selig, the commissioner, knows this stuff is going on, is profiting off of it, and Bud Selig inducted into the Hall of Fame. I think that's where, as a fan, do we morally agree with them using steroids? Absolutely not. It's not the right thing to do, not playing the game the right way. But when we see the guy who let it happen in the Hall of Fame and the players being punished, it's the not being able to compare the two. There's no consistency to what's going on that would make me validate these players who didn't use steroids being on the short end of the stick.
I mean, to your Bud Selig point, though, this is all about the MLB setting a new precedent, right? And so they've kind of put themselves in hot water by putting Bud Selig in the Hall of Fame. There's already a gray area there about what the MLB's precedent is. And if you were to put someone like Barry Bonds in the Hall of Fame, then the precedent becomes even more muddled because they're probably not going to put A-Rod in the Hall of Fame, for instance. And he is a steroid user, and it's why? Because A-Rod has Hall of Fame numbers if it's not for steroids, right? Exactly. Like with Barry Bonds, you have to talk about 2 different careers here. Like pre-2001 Barry Bonds, before he was using steroids, post-2001 Barry Bonds. Now, he had a great career beforehand, but you have to look at this. I mean, when he set the single-season home run record, that was when he was using steroids. Most of his home runs that helped contribute to the 762 career home runs during the steroid era. 4 of his 7 MVP awards, all during the steroid era. So yes, Barry Bonds had a great career, steroids and no steroids, but when you look at his watermarks for what's going to make him a Hall of Fame player, most of it did happen when he was on performance-enhancing drugs.
I think that when you enter the Hall of Fame, this is not a cathedral. When you go in to the right, there's not a bowl of holy water that you tap your fingers in and say the Our Father. You come in, and this is a place where baseball's history is celebrated. There's saints and there's sinners. There are people that play this sport that are not good people, and I do not agree with the baseball writers being able to play God in this scenario of who gave these guys the control to say that Barry Bonds isn't a good guy, or Curt Schilling, or Roger Clemens. Where have they earned their status as a moral, righteous person to decide this? And I think that when you enter the Hall of Fame, you see the plaque, it says we're celebrating these players' history, their contributions to the game of baseball. That's where I separate the good guy, bad guy, steroid, non-steroid. This is the Hall. This is the people that made baseball what it is. There is a whole generation of fans, there is a whole generation of people that are involved in baseball that have Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, all the steroid users to thank. So I think that the issue of these writers trying to figure out who's a good guy and who isn't, that's where they're falling behind the times and they're really alienating their fan base, especially when we are voting for these guys to go in the Hall of Fame while simultaneously being in a MLB players lockout right now. There is just a lot of heated stuff going on. And I think that that's where I get upset with the writers, is the whole trying to figure out the morals of it all when they have not earned that right.
Yeah. Well, I think we can agree on the fact that the writers have too much power in Hall of Fame voting, definitely. But when it comes to the Hall of Fame, baseball's a very old game, and baseball has all sorts of unwritten rules and everything surrounding baseball. And so it makes sense that they're going to have the most morally upstanding people in the Hall of Fame. And I think just the number one issue is we're not just looking at Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds represents all steroid users throughout the history of baseball. And so while I think we can both agree that Barry Bonds personally should probably be in the Hall of Fame, you just can't let him be in the Hall of Fame because it sets a new precedent that the MLB doesn't want to have. And that new precedent is that cheating is okay in baseball.
Okay. I understand that. I think that we definitely see what baseball is trying to do, and it's upsetting for a lot of fans that the consistency is not there, and it's very upsetting. But I do think that if we're able to resolve this players' lockout and everybody's able to get back to what they're used to be doing, we get some more baseball again, there'll be lots of fun. So thank you. That was great. We're going to head to Jackson after break to talk about the NCAA, his NCAA rankings.
Where you go to college makes a statement about you. This place will become a part of you, your identity for life. The University of Kansas, a great place to be you.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. My name is Jackson Reed. It is Monday in the college basketball world. That means we got some new rankings. That means we got the AP rankings, and that means we got the coaches' rankings. But we're not going to go with any of that. We're going to go with what I like to call the Riz rankings. So I'm going to break down my top 5, and I have a couple honorable mentions to go along with that. So starting things number off, what goes into these Riz rankings? Well, let me tell you. Right now, I break down who has the key wins, their record, their conference play, what kind of conference are they in, and the eye test. If I like watching them, they get rankings because this is my show and I make the rules. All right, number 5. Here we go. I have the Gonzaga Bulldogs at number 5. And my reasoning for that is they just don't play anybody. I mean, they don't play in a hard conference. My impact player for them is Drew Timme. Looking at their resume, they're 19-2, and their key wins became in the beginning of the season where they beat Texas, UCLA, and Texas Tech. 3 big wins for them. But like I said, their conference here, their conference consists of St. Mary's, San Francisco, Santa Clara, San Diego, I don't care. They don't play any good teams. That's how I see it. Number 4, let's move on. I have the Houston Cougars, and I think the Houston Cougars are the most underrated athletic program in the entire country. Houston comes out of the American Conference right now. They're 20-2. They haven't lost a game at home. Houston's on a roll right now. Number 3, Kentucky, their impact player, obviously, Oscar Tshiebwe, 15.8 points per game, 15.2 rebounds. They're 19-4, but 8-2 out of the SEC. Their key wins, UNC, I understand they don't have a good season this year. I understand that they're learning. They're still a key win to me. Tennessee, and of course, they kicked the crap out of Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse, beat them by 20. So, obviously, Kentucky have to be there. Number 2, probably where I'm going to get most of my heat, I have the Purdue Boilermakers at number 2. This is a high-flying, fun team. Travion Williams, Jaden Ivey, Zach Edey. This team is built to last. My impact player, I did end up taking Jaden Ivey here. Stat line, 17 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 3 assists. Guys shooting 43% for the Beyond the Arc this year. They're on a roll. They're 20-3. Their key wins, UNC, Villanova, Florida State, Illinois, Ohio State. And anytime you can beat a team in the conference like Iowa, they beat them twice, swept them. They're playing really well in the Big Ten right now. It's going to be a race of who's going to take the Big Ten as far as Illinois, Michigan State, Purdue. You have Wisconsin in the mix for sure, and I wouldn't rule out Ohio State either. But like I said, Purdue's my favorite to win the Big Ten right now. I really like Purdue. They're number 2 in my rankings. And number 1, shouldn't go out with much controversy, I have the Auburn Tigers. I understand that they struggled with Mizzou and they've struggled against Georgia, but this is a team that's finding ways to win games. Their impact player, obviously, is Jabari Smith. Let's roll into my honorable mentions real quick. Number 6, I have Arizona. They had a great week this week. They beat UCLA. That's something that, you beat a top 3 team. That's something awesome for them. Number 7, Duke. They rolled into UNC, kicked the crap out of North Carolina. So they're number 7. And number 8, a lot of people around the studio don't like that I have the hometown team, Kansas, at 8, but you know what? It's fair. The AP poll has them at 8. I have them at 8. They had a great win against Baylor, but, they've looked shaky. The Oklahoma game, a little shaky. Games such as the K-State game where they're down 16.5, a little shaky. This is still a top 10 team, but in my opinion, Arizona and Duke are still better than Kansas. That's where I'm going to end things today. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I'm sure we're going to do another segment of the Riz Ranking. So I'll send this to break. Thank you guys very much.
You may not hear it at first, but it's there. Our chant, rising. On this summit, callings converge, voices unify into a chorus. The that sounds out for good. For greatness. Can you hear it?
Welcome back. For our fourth and final debate, I'm joined by Blake Sevenbergen and first time on the show, Caroline Soro, to debate the NFL MVP this year. Aaron Rodgers seems to be the consensus pick for the MVP, which would be his fourth in his career and second in a row, with an astounding 37 touchdowns to 4 interceptions for the season. But Cooper Kupp had one of the most productive wide receiver seasons of all time, racking up over 1,900 yards and 16 receiving touchdowns. Blake, who do you think the most valuable player in the league was this year?
Thank you, Max, for saying my point exactly here. You said consensus pick so far right now is Aaron Rodgers. You mentioned it, 37 touchdowns, 4 interceptions on the season. The NFL MVP award is a regular season award. No quarterback in the NFL played better for their team and was more valuable for their team than Aaron Rodgers was this season. Aaron Rodgers, you saw, he was 13-3 as a starter, and the one game he didn't play in, they lost. The one game he only played half the game in the Lions at the end of the season, they lost. Aaron Rodgers is the entire Green Bay Packers organization. If their special teams wasn't terrible, I would be expecting them to be playing in the Super Bowl on Sunday. That's why I believe Aaron Rodgers is hands down the best quarterback in the NFL this year and definitely deserving of the NFL MVP award. Caroline, what is your take?
Now, I understand that Aaron Rodgers is the favorite as of right now, but this man could not even lead his team past the divisional round in the NFL playoffs at home. Now, I understand that the postseason isn't a factor in the whole MVP race situation, but it's still something to consider, which is why I am rolling with Cooper Kupp to be the MVP for this season. The wide receiver position has never won before, but I don't know why. I mean, we can't just ignore the fact that this guy just had one of the best wide receiver seasons possibly in history. He brought home just the fourth Triple Crown in NFL history and the first Triple Crown in receiving since 2005 with 145 receptions, 1,900 plus yards, and 16 receiving touchdowns. He was just 17 yards short of Megatron's record in 2012, and even though he had an extra game to do it because, 17 games now, used to be 16 games in the NFL, the difference here is that Megatron had 5 touchdowns in that span compared to Kupp's 16. So with all of the record that he's broken this season, I just don't even think it's an argument right now. I think Kupp is the clear number one.
Yeah, it's hard to argue someone who's played as good as Cooper Kupp has this year, but historically, it's a quarterback one award. I mean, if you're going to give the award to Cooper Kupp, you got to give a sliver of it to Matt Stafford for being the guy that throws him the football. Matt Stafford came to the Rams and was great this year, and obviously Cooper Kupp was the main person to take advantage of that. Another quarterback I want to mention here is Tom Brady. I know he's the GOAT. He had a great season, 43 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. It's hard to argue between Rodgers and what Brady have done this year that Cooper Kupp is necessarily deserving of them. I think Cooper Kupp will win Offensive Player of the Year, but I don't think he's the most valuable player in the NFL.
I mean, if we're going to throw other quarterbacks into the mix, we might as well throw in Joe Burrow. He had a better completion percentage on the season than Rodgers did and more passing yards on the year. And I mean, you come back from a season-ending injury, blow out your knee, and you come back and lead your team to the Super Bowl the next year. I mean, that's definitely, something to think about too. So in my mind, it still has to go to Kupp. I just can't get over the fact that Kupp had one of the best receiving seasons of all time. I mean, 11 games with 100-plus yards. That is just insane. I mean, he tied an NFL single-season record and set the Rams franchise record, and he smoked Devontae Adams, who was the second on the receiving list in the NFL this year, smoked him by just under 400 yards. I mean, nobody was even in range of Kupp. He was untouchable. So I just don't think you can ignore the fact that this guy came out and produced like that. It was just so impressive, and he's a large part of the reason, yes, Stafford is too, but he's a large part of the reason that the Rams are in the Super Bowl right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think Cooper Kupp is a large reason. Is he the only reason the Rams are in the Super Bowl? Not at all. The only reason why the Packers were as good as they were this year is because Aaron Rodgers had the efficiency to throw 37 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions. He threw 2 picks in week 1, and in the last 16 games of the season, he threw 2 interceptions. The Packers don't go if Aaron Rodgers doesn't go. When we're talking about most valuable player, I think it has to be Aaron Rodgers.
But I mean, if you're talking 37 touchdowns, Dak Prescott and Patrick Mahomes also both threw 37 touchdowns. Yes, the interception ratio wasn't as good. Rodgers only had 4. I will say that is impressive. I'll give him that. He did have the highest passer rating on the year, but he finished behind Kirk Cousins in most yards on the season. He was 10th overall out of active quarterbacks, and Tom Brady had 43 touchdowns. I mean, he beat him out by 6 touchdowns and made it farther in the playoffs. So, like I said, I just don't think Rodgers should get it. I think that it should go to Cooper Kupp. I rest my case.
Yeah, I think we might have to agree to disagree on this one. I think all 4 people we mentioned are very talented athletes and great NFL players, and all could win an MVP at some point. I think it's going to go to Rodgers this year. But that's all we have. Now let's send it back to Max with the close.
Thank you so much for tuning in for today's show. Before we go, be sure to create your own Sided account to be able to post debates of your own, as well as to comment and vote on others' debates. Along with that, follow us on Instagram at TakeaSideKU for weekly live streams and clips from the show. And also, our Twitter is also at TakeaSideKU, where we'll be having some different Sided content for you weekly. That's all the time we have for today. For all of us here at Take a Side, we'll see you next week.